Hey everyone, I've decided to do this quick comparison video. One of the viewers, one of my subscribers, Jimmy Merchant, has asked me to do a comparison between the Wuben C2 and the Sofirn SP35. So I thought that I would just go through some of my thoughts and let you know, hopefully, which one will be more suitable for you in terms of what you're looking for. So I'll start off by just giving you a bit of history behind these. So I bought them both off Amazon Australia. This was, I don't know how long ago. It was at least maybe 3 or 4 months, probably longer. And they cost roughly the same amount. I think about $50, roughly $50 each. And, you know, you get the usual stuff in there. So you get the battery, you get the charger, which was not a charger, but basically a USB cord that connects straight into the flashlight itself. You get an instruction manual, get some spare O-rings, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, oh, and you do get the battery as well, which is a good thing to mention. So especially if you're starting out and you're new to flashlights, going out and trying to find your own battery can be a little bit difficult if you're not sure what to look for, especially. So they both have batteries that are included. What's the difference? So in terms of the construction wise, like you can see, I mean, they're both quite a similar sort of size, but at the end of the day, they have quite different designs in terms of the knurling. Even the head of the flashlight, you can see at the top there's these little cutouts where if you basically put the flashlight on its head and you'd switch it on, you can see a little bit of light coming out. It's a bit more difficult to see on the C2, but it's that same type of, not sure what you call it, crenulated bezel, I think, or just cutouts on the bezel. So they're just designed for when you have them facing down to know when the flashlight is on. They're both anodized, so hard anodized, and one of the things that I've found is that the C2 holds up a little bit more in terms of the durability. And I know this for sure because I keep these two flashlights along with others when I go out to do beam shots. And yeah, I keep them in the same bag and they rattle around and whack and hit each other. So, you know, I can see with the SP35, it's difficult to see here on camera. It's very minimal, but yeah, like on the knurling, bit of the chipping on the anodization, same on the button. But apart from that, not much. Whereas on the C2, it seems to have held up a lot better. I mean, I can't really, little, you know, tiny little bits here. But apart from that, nothing much. I also find that the clip is, you know, a lot of clips that you get on flashlights, they tend to wear out in terms of the bit of paint that they put on it. And I've not seen much wear on that, but at the same time, I don't really carry this flashlight out too often with me. Whereas the SP35, this is something I probably bring along, or I used to bring along with me until I got some of my 18650 lights. And it might be hard to tell the difference, but the anodization is a little bit more shiny on the SP35 than the C2. Okay, so that's one difference. In terms of the build quality, the milling and everything, I think they're both pretty similar. I don't have a particular preference here. I think in terms of the actual design though, I like that the SP35 is just a bit lighter. So if you look at the battery tube, it's a little less dense. And let me just have a look. Open it up, and that's one thing about the C2 as well. It's kind of a bit tricky to open the take that tail cap off. It takes a little bit of encouragement, whereas the SP35 is just a little easier. Okay, so I'm just having a look at the tube, and you can see it's kind of a bit not too obvious, but the tubing of the C2 is a little bit thicker than the SP35, so that's probably contributing to a bit of the weight difference. But also the head, you know, just chunky sort of heatsink here. So you'd think that would actually make it last longer in terms of having your turbo, but actually it's the opposite, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So while we're at it, while the flashlights opened up as well, you can see it's basically, you've got a couple of tail springs here. The Wuben tail spring is pretty simple. It's just a one coil. It looks to be copper coated. But the thing is that if you look at the SP35, it's got a dual core spring. These are apparently a lot better for higher currents. And yeah, it's interesting because the SP35 is actually a bit brighter than the C2, and it doesn't look like that when you're using it, but when I do a ceiling bounce test, yeah, definitely the SP35 gives a higher lux score. The C2 does seem to throw, or not seem, but it does throw further because it has, I think, a larger bezel. It's got, I don't know, it just throws a bit further than this one. And so initially when I got it, I thought it was brighter than the SP35, but overall the SP35 produces more light. You see the batteries that are included. So the SP35 comes with the 5000 milliamp hour cell, and the Wuben 4800 milliamp cell, and it's actually significantly larger. If you look at the two cells together, it even looks, come to think of it, almost a little bit, I might be going mad, but it looks almost slightly more in diameter. It could just be the wrapping, but it's certainly longer, as you can see. And usually when you got cells with protection circuits, which is this one has one, you're going to get a bit of length added on. I think this is an unprotected flat top cell, which are usually smaller. And with these flashlights, it's not a huge deal, especially with the SP35, whether you have a protected or unprotected cell, because they have pretty good electronics in there that will shut down the flashlight once the battery hits low voltage, or even just before that point. So, for that added safety though, it's always good to have a protected cell. You can see here the Wuben cell really only works in the C2. It's just too long for the SP35, even though it does fit in the barrel, only just, it just does not give enough room really at the bottom for the spring to properly make contact. You can see the battery sort of sits slightly inside, and yeah, that was actually true. This battery sits a lot more snug in the actual tubes. The diameter is slightly larger. Strange, I didn't really notice that before. Apart from that, I mean, there's not anything else you can disassemble. With the SP35, you can actually remove the battery tube, and you might be wondering, why do you need to do that? So, basically, you can switch it around like that and have the flashlight basically, hang on, put it on this way. So if you have it this way, you can have the flashlight facing down in your pocket, okay? Or if you flip it this way, you can have the flashlight facing up in your pocket with the clip, this large part of the clip just going on the edge of your pocket. It also has a double-sided clip, so really it's not a huge deal. I mean, you can clip it on either way. I just like to use the larger clip itself rather than the smaller one. It feels more sturdy, and it does give a bit more spring to it as well. But the cool thing is you can attach this to the front of your cap, and it sort of functions as a makeshift headlamp, which I thought was a really nice use. You've got the C2 here, and you can see that the tail clip is pretty large, easy to bend and what have you as well. So it does have a lot of give in it. It's an interesting sort of design. For ease of use, very simple to clip onto your pocket, and I like that it sort of locks in there at the side like that. Apart from that, you cannot disassemble that flashlight any further, and the threads, as you can see, are lubricated quite well, and they're also fully anodized, which is a good sign. But But as you can see, just screwing it back on, it's a bit easier for the SP35. That one's done. But with the C2, it's just quite a bit tricky near the end. You got to really clamp it down. So in terms of the general build quality, I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I would say that the Wuben is probably a little bit more robust, so it probably would be able to handle extra abuse just due to the weight thickness of the barrel, and the anodization seems to be tougher than the SP35. But if we look at the designs, one thing you see is that the Wuben has like a kind of rubber button. The SP35 has a metal aluminium button, and the light sort of turns on. Same with the Wuben at the same time. You've got here the little gasket there, and that just shows you where you can charge your torch. So you have the battery straight in there, plug the charger in on the USB-C. Cool thing about the C2 is you can also use this as a power bank, and I measured it the other day. I think it charges at between 1.5 and 2 amps. So it's good in terms of, for someone just starting out or just needing a simple solution. You don't need to have your own battery charger, 21700 battery charger. Just use a flashlight charger as is. So both of them, they don't have any tactical or tail switch buttons, just ones on the side. I do feel the SP35 button will last a bit longer, just being that it's made of metal, whereas the Wuben, it's kind of like a rubber button. Not to say that it won't last, it's just feels more encouraging using a metal button. So let's talk a bit about the LEDs. So both of these have an SST40 LED. So these are capable of producing up to 2000 lumens, and they get pretty hot around that rating. So you need to be a bit careful. And the funny thing is with these lights, if you leave it on and very close to something, especially something dark, it actually burns it. So, I was really surprised when I first got these flashlights after not, collecting them for, I don't know, something like 8 years to realize just how far LEDs have come. And SST40 LEDs have a slightly greenish tint, and they are also on the cooler side. So when we think of cooler colors, we think of like approximating or going towards blue. So it's kind of like a greenish white blue color. Whereas if you think of a warmer flashlight, it's more, or approximating the yellow or the orangey type of hues. So that's what to expect with these, and they're common LEDs. I think you find them in a lot of different flashlights these days, and for good reason. I mean, they're very efficient. They produce a lot of light. The tint is really not to everyone's liking. These days, I do prefer to have an LED that's perhaps, especially if it's an EDC LED, prefer to have something maybe around 4,000 to 5,000 K. These are a little bit higher than that. I think about 6,000 plus K. And I'm pretty sure you can actually get the SST40 in 5,000 K, but correct me if I'm wrong. I might have seen that somewhere. So if that's available, I think get that one instead. It just looks a bit nicer, less greenish. And as you can see, they both have a glass lens here in the front, which is standard for most flashlights. But the reflector here on both of them are smooth reflectors. It's a bit difficult to tell on camera, but the reflector is a bit larger on the C2 than the SP35. So this explains why the C2 can throw a beam for a bit further than the SP35. With that saying, the SP35 can throw pretty far as well. And I actually prefer the beam profile of the 35. It's a bit more balanced, so you've got less of a hot spot, but just a bit more spill. And with these smooth reflectors, they actually maximize the amount of throw the flashlight has, but they also, the beam I think doesn't look as nice as say an orange pill reflector, which is a kind of mottled sort of effect, textured effect on the reflector. Talked a bit about the bezel before, nothing special there. Again, just got those cutouts, and it's just part of the body of the flashlights, and made of aluminium. So in terms of size comparisons, we can have a look and just do a quick measurement. So the C2, roughly 13 centimeters, just below 13 centimeters, and we'll go with the SP35, and that's about 12.5 centimeters, a little smaller. And if we look at the bezel, about 2.8 centimeters for the C2, and the SP35 about 2.7. So yeah, pretty, no surprises there. Like I said, it's a little bit smaller in many ways and lighter. After using these flashlights for some time, I definitely prefer the Sofirn just because it's lighter and it feels easier to carry around, and just keep in my pocket. Let's talk a bit about UI. So the UI on the C2 is pretty simple. You basically turn the flashlight on, and you can see here it just goes into whatever mode that it was in last. Now you can double click from on to go into turbo, and then click again to turn off. If the flashlight is off and you double click, it just goes into strobe. If you click on, remembers that that last mode again. Click and hold, it just ramps up to high, and then double click at any point and it goes straight onto turbo. Turn it on again, and again you can see it just memorizes that last mode. There is no way to change this from this step ramping, where it just ramps up by incremental amounts, to smooth ramping. There is a way to lock the flashlight. I think you press it 5 times. There's also a way to get the W there to kind of glow blue, so that it kind of just marks out in the dark where the flashlight is. So I think that's about it for the UI. You can lock out the flashlight as well by just loosening the tail cap a 1/8 turn. In terms of the SP35, there are a bit more options in terms of the mode, so you can switch it. At the moment, I've got it on smooth ramping. So you say I got the flashlight on, then click, press and hold, and then it goes up. Press and hold again, and the flashlight decreases. You can also press and hold and get moonlight mode. I think the Wuben has a moonlight mode as well. Let me just try. Yes, it does have a moonlight mode, but compared to the SP35, you can see the SP35 has a much more proper, appropriate moonlight mode. I still think that's too bright for moonlight mode. That's maybe 30, 40 lumens. Turn on the flashlight. It's basically the lowest of the ramping on that, whereas this on the SP35, it actually has a much lower, much more practical moonlight mode. Okay. And if I actually go into the UI, ramp down, it's separate from that. So that's like the lowest mode when the flashlight is switched on. But then when you switch it on again, press and hold that button, you've got a proper moonlight mode. So the ease of use is fantastic there. You can also switch from, I think, let me have a look. Yep, so it's switch to step ramping, as you can see. So you turn on, click 4 times, and it switches between step ramping and smooth ramping. I think you click 5 times. Oops. Okay, that's so double click for turbo. There is a strobe mode on here as well. 3, 4, 5. That locks the flashlight when you tap 5 times. 4, 5. I think when you switch on and you press 3 times, that's strobe mode. Okay. There is a couple of other modes in here. I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember what they are, but that's the gist of it. Those are the important ones anyway. So as you can see, the SP35 has a little bit more customization, and you can play around with the ramping, and also have access to this moonlight mode, which is so useful if you're using this thing as an EDC. So in terms of UI, I'm really leaning towards the SP35. It's just, for me, gives me the options to use it in a larger range of environments, whereas the C2, I think this would be more for someone who doesn't want the complexity of that. Maybe you're giving it away as a present, or maybe it's just for yourself and you are happy to have something that's just a little bit more simple, a few modes, that's it. Because sometimes, too many modes can also be an issue, especially with those dual flashlights, and not everyone's cup of tea. So I think that's about it for UI. Let's talk a bit about batteries and charging. So yeah, I did talk about the batteries already, actually. So like I said, you just basically plug that into the, if you've got a wall socket, just connect the little charger cable to that wall socket. You can also just connect it straight to your computer. I've got plugs on my power board that accept USB, and so it just charges that. It takes a few hours to charge the battery in there. But remember, the SP35 will only take flat top cells, whereas the C2 will accept flat tops as well as the protected button top cells as well. So in terms of overall performance, I can say the SP35 does produce more lumens. I did make a previous video and I'll link that in the description so you can have a look. I've just done a ceiling bounce test to highlight that. Another thing that I've noticed as well, I actually prefer the driver a lot better on the SP35, and it keeps the LED brighter for longer, even when both of them have been running, say, for 30 minutes and have reached their maximum temperatures. The SP35 manages temperature a lot better than the C2, whereas the C2, it's pretty bright when you turn it on, but within even 30 seconds, it starts ramping down and decreasing the output very significantly, and doesn't seem to recover or go back up again. Whereas the SP35, it gets hot, and then it lowers the brightness, lowers the current, and then as soon as it detects that the flashlight has cooled down a bit, it will increase the brightness again. And so you kind of have this up and down regulatory pattern, whereas the C2, it just decreases in brightness and doesn't seem to recover. So again, I'll link that video in the description if you want to see that pattern of how the driver performs. I'm not sure if Wuben have added a new driver, or even Sofirn perhaps added a new driver in the SP35. No, they've got a new model now, the SP35T, that has a tactical switch on the back, if I'm not mistaken. So something you'll need to check out. The beam profiles, like I said, pretty similar. They're kind of throwy, but with a decent amount of spill. You have these SST40 emitters, which are kind of domed emitters. Normally they produce more of a flood beam. There's a version of this emitter called the SFT40, which is de-domed and produces more light and more sort of harsher light towards the bluish white tint. So that, I find that with the SST40s paired with a smooth reflector, actually have a pretty nice beam, considering that there's a smooth reflector in here. Like I said, the C2 does throw further than the SP35. Practicality wise, it's hard to say really. I mean, if you just want something that can turn on and work without too much hassle, both of them do well. Like I said, the C2 is less complex with the UI, so if you're happy with a few modes here and there, and you don't mind it ramping down, this is completely fine. But for me, I like having the added option of a moonlight mode, turbo, just a bit longer runtime on the higher modes as well. So yeah, for me, it's definitely the SP35 for practicality. Can use it for different circumstances, which is important. I also find that being able to access turbo from off, that's an important thing for me. And you can do that with the SP35, just double tap from off. But if you double tap from the C2, you get this strobe. And that's it. You need to turn the flashlight on and then double tap again in order to access turbo. So yeah, I prefer this one in terms of its overall performance UI. So yeah, overall recommendations. I think I'm repeating myself a fair bit here. Yeah, if it came down, for me choosing between the two, I'd definitely go for the SP35, especially if they're around the same price. Sometimes Wuben, they do these sales and you can get the C2 for fairly cheap, maybe like $40. So you might save a couple of $20. In that case, it might be worthwhile for you. But, as you can see with pretty much every area that I've talked about so far, the SP35 wins, in my opinion. But, with the construction and the general ruggedness, I really think the Wuben C2 is going to stand up to a few more knocks than the SP35. And it's just the way that it's built. And again, with the anodization, it's just tough. This thing's built like a rock. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If I've missed out anything, just let me know in the comments below. I haven't made any notes or anything for this video, so I'm trying to make more videos like this because some of my review videos, I tend to be taking down a lot of notes, and I don't find that to be so fun at times. Sometimes I just like to talk and share with you what comes first to my mind. So if you have any questions or if there's anything you want to know about, yeah, let me know. If you found the video helpful, would appreciate if you click the like button. And remember, if you want to see some more reviews, some more videos, make sure you subscribe.